everyone, it's VHS Massacre Radio, live from the back of the video store. I'm your host, Tom Seymour.
I'm your other host, Ken Powell.
And, yeah, so...
You want one of these VHSs behind me?
Yeah. Grab me the Best of the Best
Debbie
part
does,
2.
Oh, no, I was going to go for Debbie Does Dallas.
Oh, yeah, Debbie Does Dallas.
Wait, that's in the other section, like behind the curtain.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'll take that one. Yeah, so the things we're doing today is we're going to take a look at the 2010 Melt movie classic, Slime City Massacre, the follow-up to the 1988 Slime City. And we also have a Debbie Rochon interview, and we started working on the sequel to VHS Massacre. So, I don't know, Ken, maybe do you want to talk about like how that went and the beginning of the sequel to VHS Massacre?
Yeah, it's official. Like this is like the official start date. It feels like it's a for real thing. We'd been discussing it now for probably like a little over a month, building up to this Debbie Rochon interview. You know, she was also our first interview from the first movie. And on my way over here to the video store,
yeah,
I passed where the old video store used to be. And that one, I kind of felt like, even though Debbie was our first interview, the day that we went into that video store, I kind of felt like that was the day that the doc kind of really began. And it was kind of bittersweet because I was like, I remember the exact day that it was because it was Halloween day. Remember the kids were coming in there trick-or-treating.
Oh, that's
as we were in there filming. So it's like, I will never forget that day. So yeah, it was like I was having some thoughts and nostalgia and like, and VHSs, I guess it's kind of all about nostalgia. And so, yeah, interviewing Debbie, kind of very fitting because of the movie that we're also reviewing, but also, just where she placed so many interviews that she helped us get with the first one. And she gave us a lot of great leads through our interview that we did with her on Sunday.
Yeah, it all sort of brings it around. And I think, wasn't Debbie the sort of start of the first VHS Massacre as far as one of the first stars we got?
She's the first star. I mean, outside of us interviewing ourselves, and I think, we only really interviewed ourselves at the beginning. She was the first interview that was not, one of us. So yeah, she was kind of like where it all started really coming on quick when we were getting the interviews, and like we got Lloyd not too long after that. Wait, the found footage guys.
Found footage guys. I think maybe was after that.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know and are visiting the VHS Massacre Radio for the first time, Ken and I are filmmakers. We've done a number of films, but the last film we did, VHS Massacre, did pretty well. Troma put it out, and Film Rise did all the digital distribution, so it got to Amazon Prime and Xbox and all these other formats like iTunes, and reviews for the most part were really positive. Not bad considering we spent pretty much nothing on it, and we were actually able to compete with other VHS docs in the same territory and do really well. It was weird when we started VHS Massacre. There was only, I think, Adjust Your Tracking was one of the only VHS docs, and it was really more only about the nostalgia of the video store era, even though I hear it's very excellent. And we were 6 months into shooting when Rewind This debuted at South by Southwest. That's the first anyone had ever heard of it. So it was like, at the time we were like, shit, do we have to worry? Like there's another VHS doc, and we didn't know what it was about. And but I think we were fine. My mentality was to not watch any of this stuff because it would kill my creativity. But eventually you saw some of them.
I saw Rewind This, I think, early on, and then Adjust Your Tracking. I still have never seen Adjust Your Tracking, but I saw, I think, VHS Revolution I watched a couple weeks ago, finally. But the reason why I watched Rewind This was kind of like, just want to make sure we didn't trip over anything that was like something somebody could be like, oh, you stole this from this. I feel like one of us had to fall on that blade, because I really didn't want to watch it either, because I'm like, it was this thing that we'd been working on. We had several months into it, a lot of work put into it, a lot of interviews we'd already conducted, and didn't want to find out that we had almost like a beat for beat replication of their documentary, but we didn't. And I think it's one of these things I told you after watching VHS Revolution that I don't want to beep our own horn, but having ourselves in it kind of really, I think, set us apart from all the other ones, because we kind of like, added to life. I think we kind of like the fanboy reaction, or the fans of VHS, that you can kind of follow along throughout the whole documentary. Add a little bit of heart to it.
Yeah, we were sort of ideally the personal perspective. Like, I was putting out a film, so I was running up against the death of physical media, putting out Mark of the Beast, while the doc was going on. So that's why we put it in there, because we just felt like we used us as an example, and then other people in distribution, like Lloyd and even the guys from Vulture Video. And so we just thought that was a good avenue. But yeah, and then, as far as our love of sort of VHS and B-movie content, I was really thinking about it. When I was a teenager, I had a show called Pungent Fun on Public Access, Nutmeg TV, and we would talk about bad direct-to-video B-movies and Eric Roberts flicks, like, as a teenager. So, it's sort of like a circle. Like, I've kind of always been doing this kind of thing. So, yeah, we just always love the sort of B-movie category, and I never thought of those films as less. Like, those were the films. My brother at the time, my oldest brother, would work at this place called Applause Video, and he could only take home the B-movies, so he couldn't take home, like, I don't know, whatever, E.T. He'd have to take home, like, Frankenstein Unbound, or Best of the Best 2, or, Blind Fury with Rutger Hauer. Those are the ones he could take home. He couldn't take home the A titles. So that's where I saw a lot of films. So growing up, I never thought of them as lesser than,
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like my beginnings with, I guess, trash cinema or B movies is as a kid. Like, my family, we had this huge satellite dish in the yard, but I was not allowed to watch, R-rated movies, like, during the daytime hours. Like, my parents wouldn't allow it. They were very religious, blah, blah, blah. So the best time for me to watch any of that kind of stuff was after they had gone to bed. So you sneak into the living room, put the volume down real low, and the thing that's usually populating the TV at the time would be monster films and B movies. Like on HBO, they would have a lot of that stuff, and that's where I kind of like fell in love with it. I didn't have a being in Kentucky, I didn't have an outlet, somebody else, like a friend to like talk about it with. So that's why, like, when Joe Bob came along, it's kind of like, in a way, having a conversation with him. Like, he would say the things like I'd be thinking or I'd want to hear, and in my mind, I'm speaking to him. We're speaking the same language. So, tying us back into Joe Bob, which another guy that we had got through Debbie Rochon for VHS Massacre.
Yeah, and well, I guess that sort of gets into it. So, we have a little clip prepared for Debbie, and basically it was we interviewed her about a myriad of different subjects involving exploitation films and B movies, but ultimately one segment that we thought was sort of apropos was the discussion of her directorial debut, Model Hunger, because she ran up. Model Hunger came out only in, I think, 2015, so just a couple years ago, and so she was running up against, you could say, new standards that some of these streaming sites put in place, because they used to be more lax. Netflix was more lax, Amazon was more lax. In the past couple of years, they actually have, I remember reading articles about how they were cracking down on sort of low-budget, unrated horror. So Debbie Rochon, who directed this, great horror film with Lynn Laurie she was starred in The Crazies, George Romero's The Crazies, and Cronenberg's The Shivers. She's B-movie royalty, and Debbie found that essentially she was like barred or blocked from these streaming sites. So yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Or
no, yeah. I mean, the whole conversation that we have, Debbie, for the interview is it's very telling, and it led to a discussion that we had about the whole Kickstarter thing as well. I don't want to go too deep into it, but how the Kickstarter I thought was going to be a way that was going to change cinema for like B movies, and I think like the kind of field that we work in. And I don't think it's happened because the Netflix avenue, even when Kickstarter was coming along, was kind of starting to close because they were making their own content. And Amazon, I don't even think Amazon really ever had a true avenue for like B movies. I mean, some of them populate their website, but they don't push it in any kind of way. There's no genre category.
I don't think it's celebrated. I think Shudder's a little better with that.
Yeah, Shudder's like it's an avenue. It's still in, I think it's infancy, and maybe with Joe Bob coming there, like get some revenue pumped into it, and maybe it'll be able to prop up El Rey, the Rodriguez channel. Like could have been an avenue, but I don't know if that's how much.
I think they started out with it and. Now I'm not sure. I mean, they do. I mean, it's cool. They'll have like a Friday the 13th marathon, but yeah, as far as no budget, I'm not sure. For a while, they were even taking film submissions. Like you could submit your short film and they'd look at it, which I thought was great. It's like at midnight, play a bunch of low budget horror. I think that's brilliant. I don't know if they're still doing it, but
I'm not even sure. But yeah, we'll go ahead and I guess play the Debbie clip. We'll take her word.
The process bringing a truly independent piece of filmmaking to the market is extremely hard. Okay, it's always been hard. There's no big breaking news here. But here's what's extremely hard. I was told by a lot of people when I made the movie that the ending was too much. Even Harry Manfredini said to me, he did the original score, he said, you really should think twice about that ending. And I was like, I heard him out, I listened to him, and I understood what he said, but I felt so strongly about it, and I spoke to my editor, and he said, you're bringing the story this far, and then are you just going to drop it? And I'm like, no. So there was no choice to keep the ending in as it was designed. And I'm still to this day glad that we did. However, in the distribution of this movie, there was a couple different companies that wanted it, smaller companies, of course. One that we went with, Wild Eye, agreed to keep the title and not cut it. The other company wanted to change the title, which wasn't a big deal, and cut it. So went with the not cutting it, Wild Eye. The trouble that Wild Eye had with it, though, was, okay, they put it out on DVD. They couldn't get it into any Redbox or Walmart. It was just way too off the charts graphic for them, even though it had, like, an incredible message about, hey, women, stop judging yourselves. Like, this is, don't worry about this. Do what you can do, but love yourself and don't fall into the pits of, beauty coming out of magazines and all that sort of thing. That was the message of the movie. But all they saw was the gore instead of the message. And but because of the graphic nature of it, there was no streaming service that would even stream us. But that was too much. And so because we got banned from the streaming, which is where everything is at now, and we only have DVD, the only Blu-ray that came out was on the special horror box special edition that they did, and they probably did like 100 or so Blu-rays just for their particular thing. That's all that it was. That's all. It was just a DVD, and it didn't stream a single place. So that is the struggle. So then you have to understand that all that money that you put into your movie, you may not even be able to, and you tell it the way you want to tell it with no holds barred. You're not like second guessing anything because you have like a really specific vision, and you're saying, hell, if I'm going independent, I want to do what I want to do. Then you also have to understand that they got even on indies, it may not be a Hollywood movie, but the indies have very similar standards to the Hollywood movies if you want to stream on those big sites. So it killed us.
All right. That was Debbie Rochon.
Yeah. I thought it was very interesting, like the concept that she could make this great film, and it's independent and it's uncompromised, and that's the thing that's just gonna bar her from streaming, bar her from Amazon Prime. I guess it's strange to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of ridiculous. I was thinking about this whenever I was watching the movie that we're going to be reviewing later about this country and how we react to sex and violence, and that goes all the way down to the corporations and violence. You can go all day with it, like dismembering and like killing people left and right. But anything that's kind of like sexual in any kind of nature is like automatically slapped as kind of unworthy, or like it's got to be done in a certain way. There's only certain ways that you can actually get away with sex in movies.
Yeah, and hers in the ending, there's the main character is killing another woman by cutting into her, let's just call it her private parts or whatever, and but it's the whole film is set up that way, and there are other if you think about like Lars von Trier films and other films that are considered sort of like these artistic films that are super graphic, this kind of stuff happens all the time and is released on all these streaming networks. I mean, only God Forgives has a scene where Ryan Gosling cuts a woman's womb open essentially and puts his fist through her stomach, and it's no one's I mean, people may have complained about it, but I can still watch it on Amazon.
Yeah, it's right there on Amazon Prime.
So the double standard is pretty wacky when you really think about it.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, with independent cinema, you don't usually have the money to grease the wheels that need to be greased, which is very unfortunate, and shows you that a lot of these corporations are compromised in some kind of way. And I mean, just because they say one thing doesn't necessarily mean that's what's happening. But you can tell, like, Only God Forgives probably had like a good 10, 15 million. I mean, it was low budget probably for Hollywood standards, but not a low budget money. $10-15 million, had Ryan Gosling attached to it, and Nicholas Refn as the director. So a couple $1,000s here or there probably helps grease the wheel and get it its rated R rating, and can put it on Amazon.
Yeah, and now the whole rating system is kind of a mess too. If you're a no budget filmmaker and you submit to the MPAA, you submit the film. And then you get back your rating. So there, you don't get any notes. You don't get a list of what to fix in order to get a certain rating, right? So if you did something like Debbie did, you'd get back an NC-17 rating, and you'd be like, "This is going to be hard. It's gonna keep me out of certain places." And you couldn't be like, "What do I have to do to get it to R?" They don't do that. They do that for any Hollywood film, and Matt Stone and Trey Parker have testified to this, essentially, that they told them exactly what to do to get their films under the R banner. And so it's the treatment is I mean, the deck is stacked. The deck is stacked, right?
Yeah.
Clearly. So we all know that anyway, but it doesn't keep us from making films. But it is clear in that interview that sort of like, I guess making an exploitation film has always been a little risky, a little edgy. 30 years ago, Debbie Rochon believes 30 or 40 years ago, it was more acceptable to make an exploitation film because people were coming out in droves to the drive-ins to watch these things. And it was more of a personal discovery. And so with streaming and social media, the judgment is pretty crazy to the point where, the drive-in culture was a film would come out, it hit the drive-ins, and then according to Joe Bob, you might not see it for like 5 years, or it might never come back.
Yeah.
So you're out. You couldn't really be that outraged. Like you could be outraged initially, and then what is it a rail against? No one can even see what you're talking about. So now you could take a film that's like 10 years old and, you know, basically keep scrutinizing it over and over and over again. So it's interesting. But then too, you can keep appreciating it over. So it's double-edged sword. You know, things are getting rediscovered, but also, you know, scrutinized. You know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like you say. It's I think for me, it kind of the bad almost outweighs the good in a lot of ways, though, because it's so many. Well, like Debbie talked about, like 30, 40 years ago, the financial risk for an exploitation film was kind of minimum because it was made for not a whole ton of money. You could get in the movie theaters for a little bit of a run. You know, had the grindhouses here in the city and other places in the country would show it, make a little money there, and then you could get your video release, and that's where you'd make tons of money. In that documentary Video Revolution, they had talked about, or VHS Revolution, they talked about, like, you know, a lot of films were making 2 or 3 times more money in video sales, and that would be true for an exploitation film. So you'd have video sales that would at least put the film in profit, so that they weren't losing money. Today, though, like that avenue doesn't exist. Without Prime or iTunes promoting these indie films, people aren't going to find them, discover them to help, you know, raise that profit margin. So it's not only is it just a risk in terms of like upsetting the public, and we've seen how mob mentality can kind of rule the day, but financial risk can be kind of devastating, where you can't make, you know, $100,000 movie and expect to get any money back, really.
Yeah, and for us, we were lucky in a sense that, you know, we were aiming to have Trauma put it out, and we took it. But what it did, what I think is wonderful, is that the people who love Trauma at least had access to it. Like, it was in the Trauma canon, right? So Trauma fans could check it out, and I think it had enough, you know, Debbie and Lloyd and all these, Joe Bob, for them to potentially connect with it. So in a sense, we were able to have access to Lloyd's fan base that he had built. So, and we were really lucky in that sense. But you know, someone who's going out there and they're just putting a film out into the ether, it's very hard to have an impact. I think Mark of the Beast is a good example. We put it out through a very honest and awesome company called MVD, who they got us into almost all the digital you know, realms for streaming. But at the end of the day, the title discovery was really hard to overcome. So
yeah, and you got to think, you know, Trauma has been around for 40-something years. It's, you know, it has 40 years of a built-in audience that has grown over time. You know, some people come and go as they age, but, you know, they have this 40 years of kind of entrenched fan base that you get to tap into. You won't find that anywhere else in the independent world. There's nobody been around. They're the longest running independent production company and distributor. So we, you know, very fortunate that they accepted the movie and put it out there, and it's gotten a lot of eyeballs on it. And we've talked about it's been generally positive. It's been a great experience. I think it's kind of what motivated us both also to explore doing a sequel, because if it might have been through somebody else and we've gotten maybe a lukewarm reception, or it wouldn't have had as many eyeballs watching it, it might not be as the fire there to kindle to like to go, let's go do another one, because people enjoy the first one.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, that's what I want, is you want to find an audience, you know? You know, I don't need to be some huge independent film icon. Like, my hero was always Robert Rodriguez. I mean, it was Lloyd Kaufman, but Robert Rodriguez too in the late '90s, mid to late '90s, because he had made this $9,000 film, El Mariachi, and so we took his template and we've been sort of using that. I've been using that for years, primarily because we just didn't have the money. You know what I mean? So it was either do it this way or don't do it. And the truth is, I love filmmaking. I love talking about filmmaking, but that's not enough. I need to do this stuff, you know. So filmmaking is a very strange art form because in the past, it's been one of the most expensive hobbies you can have.
Oh, absolutely.
With buying film and developing it and being able to cut the stuff. And so now it's relatively cheap. I think for, what do you think, $3,000 you could get a very good camera setup and lens setup.
Yeah, and get you, I mean, even laptops today have, even a mid-range model will have enough horsepower so that you can, use Adobe, or if you're in a Final Cut, yeah, you buy you a couple good lenses, and yeah, a couple $1,000. There should be nothing stopping you from making a decent-looking film, except for maybe a bad script or whatever. But outside of that, like anybody can make a film these days. We talked about the shooting on your cell phone. People, you can make movies on your iPhone if you really want to.
You really want to. But I would say for half of the price of an iPhone, you can get a Lumix G7, shoot with good glass, be able to interchange lens, shoot with less video compression, higher color quality, shoot in 4K, which iPhone can do. But so that's the whole thing. Is like I didn't understand Soderbergh pushing the iPhone to shoot movies on the iPhone when iPhones is actually a pretty extravagant item as compared to a G7. Actually, you can get for probably about $450 now. Some of those iPhones are double that easily. So yeah.
Yeah, well, going back to the Kickstarter thing too, and going back to Robert Rodriguez, I had this. Not a premonition, or I just had this thought that in the '90s, the early '90s, we had this independent director, new wave, this explosion where we had people like Kevin Smith, Rodriguez, Tarantino. Soderbergh was kind of in there. He started, I think, a couple of years before those guys, and the director of Slacker.
Oh God!
Forgetting Days Confused.
Linklater.
Yeah, Richard. They were all sort of around the same time frame. It was this explosion where we had these young, fresh-faced directors doing movies. A lot of them were done cheap. Like Clerks was, I think, a $20,000 movie. Rodriguez had directed El Mariachi for a couple of thousand. Linklater had directed Slacker for very little money. Yeah, very cheap. Yeah. And so,
Spike Lee, even before those guys.
Yeah, even before those guys. So they all came around the same time, and I feel like for the last 20-something years, we've kind of been waiting for the next wave of these independent guys or girls. And initially, when Kickstarter came along, you're like, maybe this is when it will happen. And there's been a few Kickstarter successes, but most of them have been related to directors that have existed or projects that existed, like Super Troopers 2 was built on I think maybe Indiegogo, Veronica Mars, and then Zach Braff had a movie. But we haven't seen this next wave of directors come, and I think it's because the Hollywood system has now become so
insulated and
the companies that distribute, they're all together. They're all there's this marriage, synergy, as they probably would call it.
Yeah, there's only a few companies left, parent companies, that own most of the media. They draw this hard line to keep out low budget. So you have to do something super gimmicky or mind blowing to make that grade. The only thing I can even think of is Paranormal
Activity.
And that's like a decade old now, at least, right?
Yeah, so, the Blumhouse, which sprang from that.
Yeah, so it's very difficult, and I think too, things like YouTube sort of sidetracked a lot of youth that would have normally been diving into feature filmmaking, and they sort of went for the web series or web hosting sort of TV show style, web series. I think that might have sidetracked an entire generation. Not that it's bad. I mean, that stuff's great. If you look at, the Angry Video Game Nerd, it's like that. Watching that guy's videos got me through a lot of depressing times in my life where I would just put that on and feel better.
Yeah.
So he made a feature film, but it took him a long time. So I just think this guy Mike Watt, who's a very successful author and a college professor as well, and he would write these books about independent film, primarily in the mid '90s to, let's say, early 2000s. And I would get in some of these books. He would write about, he'd call them kitchen sink movies, where it was like genre blenders or independent and horror films. And he felt like the last wave of independent filmmaking was sort of like, post Christopher Nolan, right? So like David Gordon Green, that sort of era was maybe the last like giant that you heard of, indie film giant. But it's really hard to say what's the future of it. Clearly people are making independent feature films, but what I see more and more from youth, especially working in a college like I do, is that they're obsessed with shorts. They're obsessed with micro shorts, 5-minute shorts, 10-minute shorts. That's good for teaching. But when I got into filmmaking in the mid to late '90s, the short films, there was almost no place for them.
No.
So the feature film was the only way to make a product that another company could then come in and put out to the world. A short film was just not a particularly good product. So that's not to say that they weren't brilliant. It's not about the quality. It's about unfortunately, the marketability.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of great feature films that started off as short films. Napoleon Dynamite was one of those. But yeah, the only really market for those places was short film festivals. That was the only place that they were ever going to be really screened. And then the Oscars would have an award category. But outside of that, you weren't going to hear about these short films. But with the advent of YouTube and Vimeo and some of these other websites, they now have more of a prominence. And yeah, I guess it's kind of fitting. It fits with the... I mean, I think most of us can agree, like even myself as a teenager, attention spans were probably they're a little shorter. I mean, let's be honest, like it takes a while for you to grow into your brain. And so, like, seeing a 5-minute short film is easier to set through than watching, like, a 3-hour masterpiece or Gone with the Wind or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, like, YouTube, I love to watch YouTube on my couch, right? So you have to go in there, but primarily people are watching this stuff on mobile, so they don't want to sit through a lot of time, and so it's a whole generation of people who have found probably more importance from the short format than feature format. Though I have no doubt that they're all like sort of cinephiles and have seen at least a lot of the films in the last 10 years. So, but I think too, it's like this stuff is so CGI heavy and budget heavy that it's really a different era. Like growing up, we would watch stuff that we could see very clearly how we could make. And then this is just so in this crazy realm of CGI. They're doing these $200 million films to a point where I could see, like, why would you like, as an independent film, you're not going to compete with that, So you have to find something more story-based or something more... profound than that. And I mean, that's the way I see to move forward as a filmmaker. Don't try to compete with Hollywood. Don't do an action film with fight scenes if you have no money and no stunt people and no martial arts background. Or
a digital, like $100 million digital studio that can do your effects.
Yeah, but you can probably make a great horror film. You could probably make a great comedy or comedic drama, something like that,
Yeah, I mean, drama pieces I think still, really work well, like things that deal with more an everyday life and not some, superhero that's traveling to Mars and then back again.
Yeah, I would say I think there's probably a disconnect in, like, the stuff they're peddling in Hollywood and the disconnect between people's normal lives. It's a huge chasm where it's like no one has the life of Tony Stark, right? Like, let's get back to doing some, gritty cinema, So, but who knows? Maybe there'll be a next wave. I mean, there is a next wave of feature length filmmakers who are, let's say, in their 20s, right? So that would be the next generation, right? But their stuff's probably out there. I know Troma has some of it. Kansas Bowling, I think she's only like 20. She did the film BC Butcher. But again, the reason why I know about Kansas Bowling is through Troma. Yeah. It's because I know that they're going to have independent film stuff. So it's like, how do I find these young filmmakers, right?
It's definitely very tough. I mean, there's a few companies outside of, like, even in the kind of the Hollywood circle. A24 is kind of like, they're in the Hollywood sphere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But they are definitely trying things. They're experimenting, and
they're independent in quotes because it's a bunch of former Hollywood producers and directors, and I'm sure they raised money probably from people in the industry, and a lot of their directors are known A-listers, and a lot of their stars are A-listers. But their content is good. They're doing interesting, you call it lower budget filmmaking.
Yeah, if this was 30 years ago, they would probably definitely be considered independent. And even now, at least they have the appearance of being independent, but they definitely have heavy investors and a lot of Hollywood, heavy hitters involved.
They remind me of early Miramax.
Yes, yeah.
Essentially,
Yeah, before they, or after they had picked up, the Rodriguez and the Kevin Smiths, which their initial efforts were truly independent, but once they got into the Miramax, I mean, Miramax was like, yes, they were independent of 20th Century or Fox or Columbia or any of those guys, but yeah, I mean, they had a lot of money involved. So.
And the other thing too that's interesting about, sort of trivia-wise, about independent filmmaking is as old as filmmaking, because essentially the Hollywood studios were started, as Lloyd Kaufman told us, by people trying to get the hell away from Edison. Yeah. Edison is thugs that would beat up people who were trying to use their film equipment, use their patented film equipment. And so a lot of them went out to Hollywood to get away from them. So Hollywood originally started as independent content. And this is, almost from the beginning. So independent film has always been around. Thinking, in the 60s you had Cassavetes. In the 70s, you had a lot of exploitation films. That was all independent. All Grindhouse was independent. And then 80s, you had like Spike Lee. You had, I think, Soderbergh and Linklater, or he was maybe into the 90s too. And then you had, like you said, the 90s guys, which was like Robert Rodriguez. So anyway, not to belabor a point that you already made, but you can track indie filmmaking like kind of from the beginning. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah,
it's always fascinating too to see with each of these kind of generations, Hollywood eventually will try to start emulating, either by acquiring the directors of those movies or by just having directors emulate what those guys were doing. Like, you had the Easy Rider of the late 60s gives way to a lot of the independent stuff, or what looks like independent stuff that is being done by studios, later. With like, guys like Robert Altman and these other guys.
Right.
So it's always interesting how Hollywood very rarely today does anything. Well, in the last, I think, they have their ups and downs, but in the last, for a while, they haven't truly done anything innovative. It's usually like the stuff that looks innovative was usually from a guy that had done it somewhere else first, and then they brought it on, or they ate the idea from somebody else.
Yeah, like I think of Ghost Story, which is an A24 film, but the guy did like whatever, Pete the Dragon for Disney or something, and then and then the Florida Project, that director, so it's like, the thing is, they're really great films, so no qualms with that. Really amazing stuff. But obviously, like, these are not like, this is the fresh face of the new generation. No, these are people who've been around for a very long time, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. At this point, I've been around for a very long time, But anyway, should we start talking about Slime City Massacre?
Slime City Massacre, yeah. It's kind of fitting because as I'm watching it, I'm like, this movie kind of ties back into our trilogy movies of post-apocalyptic New York City movies,
right, yeah.
Which was not like the intention.
Yeah, that is wow. That's funny.
Yeah, it was like once again another death squad sent in to clean up the homeless and the cannibals, so that businessmen can come in and take over.
Yeah. It's funny, right? The film starts out with there's some dirty bomb. You find out it's a dirty bomb that goes off. And I also didn't know Lloyd Kaufman was in this either.
I did, because I realized I had already seen that scene before. I don't know if Troma posted it a while ago or if I'd seen it through Slime City, some other posting, but I'd already seen that scene. And I'm like, oh, it's like this. I've seen this scene. And our good friend Lloyd Kaufman, unfortunately, does not survive the dirty bomb.
Right. But yeah, so essentially a large part of New York. Were they specific of what borough that was?
No, I'm assuming it's Manhattan because honestly, I don't know. Yeah, it's not very specific.
They call it Slime City, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this dirty bomb goes off, and so kind of unrelated to that, these people who are essentially drifters wander into this building and meet these two characters. Debbie Rochon is one of them, and so basically, and who's the other one? Lee Perkins, who's
not Roman,
Mason.
Yeah.
So they basically befriend each other. They come across this basement filled with wine and Himalayan yogurt.
Himalayan yogurt returns from the first movie.
So yeah, and that, that's a reference to the first film. They start drinking it, and they immediately start melting in various colors: slime, blue, and orange, and pink.
Which is funny because their outfits beforehand match up to the color of slime that they turn into.
Ah, interesting.
So, the blue, the red, the pink, the green, and the orange.
And then, so they have this insatiable drive to murder people.
Well, first, the insatiable drive to have sex.
Yeah.
I I know that there was some sex scenes in the first one, but I didn't recall like the need quite being so bad.
Yeah. In the first Slime City, the guy was he takes this apartment and this woman sort of seduces him, but I thought it was to make him drink and eat the stuff. But
yeah, that's what that's how I recall it. It wasn't, he didn't drink it and eat it and then want to
Yeah. So, but in this one, they have an insatiable drive to have sex, and then and an insatiable drive to run around murdering people. And once they murder people, then they revert back to not being slimy. And so, what I like about the device of this movie and the first one was, like, fairly fast they set up a situation where the main characters are kind of fucked.
Yeah.
Like, and I kind of like that. They put the stakes very high. Like, your skin will melt off unless you kill someone. What would you do? It's like, at one point they're debating we should just kill ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fascinating mechanism, I think, for drama, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you say, it puts the stakes immediately there at the very height. Like, these characters are fucked, and like their choices are very, very limited. And if you've seen the first movie, you know that there's no real way to put this back in the box.
Right. Yeah. So basically, you have the sort of there's a Donald Trump type character named Ronald Crump, and he's trying to obviously buy the neighborhood and kick everyone out. So they kind of go in and try to, and then they essentially murder everyone in it, which is, like you said, it is so similar to like, what was it? Escape from the Bronx.
Escape from the Bronx, yeah.
Yeah. But this guy, Roy, how do you say it? Frumkiss?
Frumkiss, yeah.
Really interesting trivia about him. His IMDb profile page is him getting hit in the face with a pie because he was in Dawn of the Dead. He was one of basically the first zombie that gets hit in the face with a pie when Tom Savini and the biker gang come in. And I just think it's a cool legacy. I mean, it's not, He was also in The Substitute, which the first Substitute I actually liked.
Is that Lou Diamond Phillips, or is that who?
It's Tom Berenger, I think.
Tom Berenger, okay.
So,
I think Lou Diamond Phillips was in a similar type. It's like with these...
He was probably in Substitute Part 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
The late 80s and 90s were like this run of like, bad youth needs these strict teachers to set things right.
Yeah. But it ran the gamut from like Stand By Me, like the sort of like...
No, Lean on Me.
Oh, sorry. Lean on Me, where it's like Morgan Freeman and he's like, changing the students' mentality and pulling them up. But The Substitute was kind of like, he was kind of just an asshole, So it was kind of an interesting film. But Roy Frumkiss was also in Street Trash, which is another Melt film. And so I wonder if that's, maybe they... he played the melted businessman. So I wonder if director Greg Lambertson got Roy Frumkiss just because he was in these other Melt films and Romero films and things like that.
Yeah, this film though I think was made in Buffalo. I think that might also be kind of a connection too. I think Dawn of the Dead might have been shot in Buffalo.
Was it?
Portions of it. So we have the return of the slime creatures again, and then we also have like these cannibal. Well, I guess these. Well, the coolest part of the movie I liked was these guys that had like this black electrical tape around them and these like gas masks on.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really cool looking creatures added to it. Then we also have this homeless population that is run by a mayor. They have their own mayor, which involves a lot of prostitution, a lot of heavy prostitution. Then we have these douchebag bro guys, which were kind of felt a little out of place. I'm like, where did these guys come from, and why are they in the shittiest part of the town? I had a very uncomfortable scene where I thought we were going to witness a homeless man giving a blowjob to a bro.
Yeah, it was weird because he's like going through. The guy, pays money to get into the brothel, which is essentially like an abandoned warehouse. And he's walking through and he's looking at all the men, the women, and just picks out like this like
random
50-year-old like businessman that he's gonna get a BJ from. It's like, okay,
mouth sex with,
odd choice, okay.
Yeah.
And then he proceeds to try to beat the crap out of him. What I thought was cool is there was a lot of the original cast from the original Slime City. So you had Greg Sabin, I believe, was the main character, Alex from the original Slime City, and he plays like the cult leader. You finally see the scene as to what happened in the original Slime City. So the interesting about this thing about the film is it's like a prequel and a sequel, and in Slime City goes kind of right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So, and then I think it's Mary Huner who comes back. She played the girlfriend of the main character in original Slime City.
Yeah.
So when she pulls off her mask, she does the reveal.
Yeah, big reveal of Alex's girlfriend from the first movie.
Yeah. So it was really cool to see her in that again. I mean, overall, I thought the movie was pretty cool. I like the fact that in a way you could say melt films in a way are having a resurgence, at least in my mind, like because they're being remastered and re-released. Street Trash came out on Blu-ray, and at least some companies are going back and looking through some of these old films and remastering. And in this movie, the sequel's not that old. It's from 2010.
Yeah. I will think. If you listen to last week's episode, the one check mark that I gave it was that there was no boobs. This movie makes up for that. You get a couple of sets of boobs in this, which for I think trash cinema, you gotta have those. It's kind of like it comes with the territory. But I would say, like, I was kind of confused. I didn't understand why Debbie's character turned into just a bucket of slime so quickly.
Oh yeah, she melted super fast, and
it was very interesting. I love the effect of her, like, just like this face in the middle of the slime. It was really well done.
Yeah, like they're sort of slowly melting. I think she drinks way too much, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
And eats way too much, and then you just see her in the next scene, and she is like liquid in a tub with a face. It almost reminds me of in Street Trash with there's a scene melting. There's a melting scene where the guy's face is in the bottom of a toilet because he was on the toilet and he melts. So it was that. It was like that. I mean, it was with a tub, but it looked really cool. It was really upsetting and freaky. And,
yes.
But then she turns back into a human at the
human, and she has like this amazing scene where she talked. We interviewed her and we brought up Slime City, and she talked about this having this vagina in the middle of her chest, which is really cool looking.
That bites people. That can sever heads and stuff. Like in the original Slime City, the main character, he gets punched in the stomach, and his stomach becomes a big toothy mouth and chops the guy's
snaps limbs.
And then in this one, the guys, one of the guys has the same thing happen. His stomach chops a guy's leg off, I think, and then Debbie chops the guy's head off. So it's all about, it's interesting the set of abilities that you get with the slime.
Yep. Also, again, like, I think them going back and kind of explaining, like, the alcohol and the wine and the yogurt and how it works together with the ectoplasm. I guess it kind of takes it, because we talked about it seemed a little convoluted in the first one, but now seeing it played out, I don't think it's quite as convoluted. It kind of makes sense how these two interact and what the purpose, what is going actually on with this stuff. Like that prequel scene.
Yeah, ultimately, the yogurt is ectoplasm, which essentially it's like helping evil spirits to inhabit their bodies, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if they were drinking the green slime from Ghostbusters and then got possessed by the spirit. That's essentially what it is, Yeah. So yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I did notice that it looked like the one of the lead actresses had injury on her hand. I think Debbie talked about that briefly.
Oh yeah. I totally forgot about that when I was watching it, and then her hand was wrapped for most of the movie.
Yeah, her hand was wrapped up in bandages for most of the film, and I think it's because she injured her fingers, I think, at some point. I think it's Jennifer Beal, perhaps, as Alexa.
Yes, that was the main actress.
And he bandages up her hands at one point, and then I feel like sometimes she might have a bandage, sometimes she didn't. Ultimately, I didn't really give a shit. I mean, they're bandaging up their heads all the time anyway, so I don't think it mattered at all.
And in the first one, Alex was wearing like these gloves over his hands and stuff, so it's it felt more like a callback to that. Yeah, I didn't pay too much attention to it until I think like the very end. There's a shot of her getting into a car, and it's like this big black bandage, and that was like, it's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like she's only wearing it on one hand.
Yeah, and it reminded me of Debbie talking about on the set, just like how someone had I think she had a hand injury, and then she had to get some stitches or something, and so she was probably wearing one of those bracers or whatever.
Yeah, and they just used some set design and covered it up, some makeup effects.
Yep.
Though, if you guys if you've already seen the movie or you are really into behind the scenes stuff, they actually have a YouTube channel. It's called SCM, Slime City Massacre Survivor on YouTube. All the videos are from 2009 when they were in production, and they were posting every other day. And there's a lot of cool behind the scenes stuff. Lloyd is in some of the scenes. There's more Debbie stuff. If you're into how independent movies are made, and Trauma also is great about doing these behind the scenes stuff. So, but this is on YouTube, free to watch. I watched a couple myself this morning. I was trying to figure out what camera they were using, but in the stuff that I watch, I can never get a really good look at it because I'm always interested in that kind of things. Because it was shot on digital, but I was trying to figure out because this is 2009, and I was trying to figure out
looked great.
Yeah,
it looked so good. Yeah, I don't know. We should find out what they shot on because it was really great. Well, that's all I got on that. What about you?
No, again, guys, it's on Amazon Prime. You can rent it. I highly recommend doing that. And while you're there, watch VHS Massacre.
Yep. Oh, and Debbie Rochon is awesome in the film. It's so cool to see her in this sequel to such a important Melt movie.
Yeah.
So she's part of that legacy. I think Debbie has been in a lot of sequels to really important films. So it's kind of cool. I believe she's in Citizen Toxie.
Yes.
And Slime City Massacre. And it's really cool stuff. And also check out Model Hunger. Just buy the Blu-ray. Buy the Blu-ray and check it out. It's a really cool film. For me, it's like John Waters meets a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really cool combination. And also stars my friend Carbon Capobianco. So check that out.
Awesome. Yeah, and while you're there, throw in VHS Massacre into your card as well.
Yes.
Also available on Blu-ray.
Yes.
$18.
Really?
I saw it this morning when I was doing my research. And I was like, VHS Massacre. Oh.
Or pick it up at any convention too. Any Comic-Con, any con.
Yeah, anywhere where Trauma's at.
There's going to be the Trauma booth, and they always have it. Okay, well, thanks so much for listening. Live from the back of the video store. I'm your host, Tom Seymour.
I'm your other host, Ken Powell. Check you later.